screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones of holly. Suggestions that a flicker rate to camouflage the folly. Attempt a mental robbery, executed sloppily. The hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful. Friends, tonight on Rogue Ways, we are joined by one of the best researchers who has consistently brought a stunning level of insight and elocution to her work, her presentations, her amazing writing, and her engagement with material that would have long since put many off the job, while she remains steadfast to the goal of discovering what exactly is happening in this mad world, who is pulling off the heists and societal controls, and what we can do about it. Her work stretches back many years and will lead us all into many more, and we are better for it. Welcome the beautiful mind, the loving heart, and the fearless soul, Sofia Smallstorm. So good to have you back on Rogue Ways, Sofia. It's my honor to have you here as always. How are you today?
I'm fine, Lindsay. Thank you so much for that nice introduction. I know you wrote it many years ago, right? But it
Right.
works. But
It keeps working.
Well, the thing is, I don't mean to praise myself, but when I hear it, I go, is that true? Is that no, can't be true. But anyway, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for all you do and for being here. And thank you to all the listeners and viewers out there who subscribe at rogueways.substack.com for the channeled messages and the articles that are helpful for you in health and wellness and life, and otherwise at rogueways.substack.com. My books also on rogueways.org or Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Audible even. Thank you to all of you who are listening or reading those books. And those of you who book one-on-one healing and support sessions with me at rogueways.org or calendly.com/rogueways. You are all deeply appreciated and loved. Thank you for being here and for being you. And Sofia, back to you with the pointless question of the episode, which is, I was wondering if you wanted to tell us about a regret you have in life.
Yes, it's not terrible now because I've rectified it. But this new unfolding of me has to do with something I rejected many years ago. And that was this stuff, a jar that somebody brought me and said, you have to take this. It's really good. It's really good. MSM, take it. And I thought, what? It looked like granulated sugar, and I immediately put it aside because it wasn't even labeled. And I didn't know what it was. And that was that. And then several years later, a friend sent out emails about MSM, and he said, oh, you have to buy some. So I did, and I ended up giving that away. I knew it was sulfur of some kind, but again, I wasn't, I don't know, compelled or something, or I was ignorant, I don't know. So anyway, I still had some in my cupboards. I had the original jar, and then I had some other jar that I put some of this second batch into. And then this past summer, a customer of mine who has become a friend, he's a very kind-hearted man. He's from South Carolina, and he kept telling me about MSM, and I said, oh, yeah, I know about that. And but I didn't know. I didn't know about that. I didn't know anything about it. And he said, you have to try it. You have to take it. I said, no, I have some. He goes, well, then take it. And I didn't. I just said, I know all about it. It's sulfur. I eat enough onions and garlic and cabbage and cruciferous vegetables. He said, you don't really know what this stuff does. And I didn't. And so he ended up sending me 2 pounds of it. And he called me and said, you have to take it. And I said, oh, all right. So I opened a bag and I took a 1/4 teaspoon, and it was awful. As another friend of mine says, it's like putting your tongue on a battery. That's what it tastes like. And I immediately called him and I said, forget about it. I'm not taking this stuff. It tastes horrible. He goes, yeah, but you have to take it. And he begged, and he's so kind. He's very Christian as well. I said, all right, look, you're so nice. You sent me this stuff. I know you really want me to take it. And the only way that I'm going to be able to take it is to hear your kind voice telling me to take it. And so I started to take it, Lindsay, only a quarter teaspoon. And immediately strange shifts in Sofia started to happen.
Wow.
And do you know
I
anything?
mean, it's amazing because I feel like there's so many times we resist these things, and I do the same thing. I'm like, yeah, I know. Recently for me, it's been aspirin. I know a lot of people are just against it, but it has been helping me in ways that I didn't expect. And so I take a really low dose every day. It's not even for blood thinning, it's for hormones, but just unexpected things like this that you can resist so much and then can have these huge effects. And also, I'll just add, and then maybe you'll tell us a little bit more about that, a lot of times when we take a supplement, we don't experience any noticeable changes. So it's pretty amazing that you noticed these changes.
Yes, and I think a lot of people do, and it takes a while before the huge shift in your being happens. And again, I'm not trying to be mystical. I'm just telling you from my experience what has gone on with me. So first of all, MSM sulfur, and we're going to go into the flyer I wrote. Well, as I started taking it and I noticed, my gosh, it's definitely affecting me, and I know this is going to work if I could just hang in there. Because sulfur is like a coach coming in and telling you who you think you're a good athlete, you think you're competent at your sport. You might think you're very good, very good. You have a lot of talent. That's what everyone has told you. And now this coach comes in, this new coach, and says, nope, you're doing everything wrong. We have to start all over. And corrects everything you're doing. And so at first you just feel completely confused. You're being overhauled, but you know that. So I said on a recent show, SGT Report, he allowed me like 2 minutes at the end of the show to talk about sulfur. This was in October. And I said, well, sulfur will kick your butt. You might not be able to leave the proximity of a toilet for the first 2 weeks.
Wow.
And still people bought it. I sold so much sulfur from that show. And that's indeed what happens. It is extremely integral to the manufacturing of an antioxidant, often called the body's master antioxidant, called glutathione. So the first 2 weeks, who am very small and very low in weight, I lost 3 pounds because my body deployed all of the water in it to make tons of glutathione, which it didn't have the ability to make because I didn't have enough sulfur. And glutathione is a molecule that contains 3 amino acids, all of which are sulfur-based. So once you have a lot of sulfur coming in, your body makes a lot of glutathione. And glutathione is like a vacuum cleaner. It goes through your blood and it's sticky because of its sulfur content, and all the toxins stick to it and you poop it out, right? So those first 2 weeks, you really get house cleaned, really get house cleaned. And some people who I've sent sulfur to have quit because they tell me I can't leave the house. I'm stuck here, you know, because of this flushing. So, or it could be peeing. You could just pee and pee and pee. But you get through that. And then other amazing things start to happen. So I have a condition that you get if you are of Central European or Nordic European descent, and it's called Dupuytren's contracture. Do you know what that is?
No, I've never heard of this.
Well, I'm sure you know what it is because you've seen people or heard of people who have it. They don't often use the term Dupuytren's. That's a French surgeon, although I think it's more of a Dutch-sounding name. From the 1800s, he actually identified and named this thing. So what happens is later in life, like in your 50s or 60s, the tendons in your palms start to thicken. And you'll notice lumps forming in your palms, sometimes very painful nodes on the other side of the knuckle in your palm, and you lose flexibility in your hands. And about 10 years ago, I noticed, oh, my left hand I can't bend the fingers back as easily as I can on my right hand. And I didn't think anything of it until it started to become very painful. And usually they say it's not painful, but for me, Dupuytren's was painful. I noticed horrible thickening of one tendon in the palm, and a painful node appeared so that it was difficult for me to pick up weights in the gym because it hurt. Then my right hand, those tendons started to thicken. I went for some laser treatments. I even bought a laser to soften up, cold laser therapy to soften up the tissues. And they always tell you, bend your fingers back, bend, stretch, flex. So every red light, this is what I'm doing. I'm sitting there bending my fingers, and the searing pain doing this. I mean, it was like holding a torch to my palms. And if you have advanced contracture, your ring finger and your pinky, this happens mostly to men, will start drawing in to the palm and curling in, and then they do this ugly surgery which doesn't work. They cut you from the wrist all the way to the fingertip, and they strip the tendons of the fibritic material, and it doesn't work. It always comes back.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, oh my God, women are really not supposed to get this. It's supposed to be very slow in women, but for me it wasn't slow, and it did hurt, and it was not what I was looking forward to in terms of the surgery that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So $2 of sulfur fixed it.
Wow.
And there's no cure. I went to a hand surgeon and I asked him, is this what I have? He goes, yep. He goes, there's nothing we can do. We can try steroid shots. One day you might have to have surgery. And $2 of sulfur, Lindsay. I can crack my knuckles. I can bend my fingers back. There's still some thickening, but the nodes don't hurt. Everything is flexible, pliable. And that's what happens to all the tissues in your body. You start feeling really limber, okay?
It's pretty amazing, and we all, I think, know at this point, if people are listening to you or I, they're probably aware that most of the allopathic medicine and Western medicine, it doesn't take into account nutrition. It doesn't take into account, these types of things that can actually have such a huge effect, including, and we've talked about this before on the show, our mental and emotional state. Even what we call mental illness can often be cured by nutrition if you are getting the right things and the right doses at the right times. And so to hear this from you, I'm both very, very happy. I'm not that surprised. I'm just wish that I would have heard about it earlier, and I'm excited to hear what else you have to tell us about it, because it's something also I've heard of in terms of I was taking it for a minute because I found a study that showed that 80%, which is a huge amount of people in any study to have any positive effect at all, 80% of people begin to regrow hair by taking MSM, which is what you're talking about here, right? The sulfuric compound. So tell us more.
Okay, well, I'll start with what happened to sulfur. So the guy who sent me the 2 pounds of MSM kept telling me that the sulfur cycle is broken. The sulfur cycle is broken. I said, what does that mean? What does it mean? And he couldn't really explain it. And I went online and I researched sulfur, and nowhere did it properly, to my standard and satisfaction, explain why the sulfur cycle is broken. So there's something on the earth called the sulfur cycle, and I read about that, but I could not find why it's not working anymore, except for a slight mention of acid rain, which didn't really line up with the standard that I wanted for this explanation. So it took me 2 months to write that little flyer that I sent you. And I decided I'm going to find out and I'm going to explain. And one of these flyers is going to go out with every sulfur bag that I sell. And it's in my store, avatarproducts.com. And yes, you will get literature with it. And we're going to go through that literature now. All right. So here's how sulfur appears in the earth. It is an abundant earth element. Abundant. And it has the chemical symbol S and the atomic number 16. So it has an organic and an inorganic form. And what that means, that relates to chemistry. Organic chemistry is the study of compounds that contain carbon atoms. That's all it means. It doesn't mean grown without pesticides. That's a different definition of organic, all right? It means what contains carbon, carbon-based matter. So inorganic compounds do not contain carbon. And inorganic sulfur is highly reactive. It doesn't dissolve in water. And it is found, in rocks, sedimentary rocks. So way, way away from biological life is where nature puts its, you could say, dangerous, it's bio-unfriendly materials, like its radioactive materials, are not near life, apart from being near bacteria that ooze out enzymes that break down rocks and turn rocks into soil. So sulfur, inorganic sulfur, as the tectonic plates of the earth shift and rocks break up and are exposed to air, inorganic sulfur is released, all right? And it is also, this is that yellow crystalline material that people think of sulfur as, and they used to call it brimstone, fire and brimstone, right?
Yeah.
And inorganic sulfur is exposed to the air, and it is then brought down through rainfall and snowmelts into bodies of water. So this is the sulfur cycle that I'm explaining. So sulfur circles through the Earth's geosphere and biosphere, but it starts with the weathering of deep sedimentary rocks. And then as it moves down with water into the rivers and into the lakes and into the streams and then eventually into the ocean, that's how and where it's converted from inorganic to organic form. Because there are bacteria and archaea and methanogens, these organisms in the lakes and rivers and oceans, these microorganisms that thrive on the inorganic compounds of the earth, and they absorb them, and then they transform them into carbon-bound organic forms. So that's why we need the rain and the air and the snow and the lakes and the streams to convert this inorganic sulfur into organic sulfur. So once it's in the bodies of water in its organic form, which is water soluble, it collects in the atmosphere, in atmospheric vapor, and it goes up into the clouds and it comes down as rain, and now it's organic sulfur in the rain, and it feeds the plants and the soil and the animals. All right, this is the biogeochemical sulfur cycle.
Wow, and it's been broken, apparently. It's been disrupted.
It's disrupted, right. So I have to go back and forth in my flyer because I'm not following it exactly. But after World War II, as we know, there were all these companies that refined metals and they produced chemicals for the war industry. What were they going to do now that the war was over? They had to reinvent themselves. And so this is where we got all these products for domestic use, like the heavy-duty chemical cleaners, the Lysol and whatnot, right?
Right.
So these manufacturers started making chemical products for agricultural and home use. And these creations included sulfur-based fertilizers and pesticides. And the government, I found out, actually started paying growers to use these sulfur-based fertilizers and chemical pesticides.
Oh, wow.
And so now these products contained inorganic sulfur, the bad kind, the brimstone. And these products released sulfuric acid. And so this inorganic sulfur started to engulf areas of the industrialized world after the war. So that fertilizer runoff pollutes rivers and lakes and makes them all stinky and dark, right?
Right.
And then we have sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide from hydrocarbon fuel use that permeates the air.
Mm.
So with inorganic sulfurs starting to permeate the air, the atmosphere, and it began to fall on the land as acid rain, the sulfur in the waterways and oceans, that sulfur cycle was overwhelmed. There just wasn't enough. When you see a body of water and it's polluted with sulfur, it means that there aren't enough microorganisms in it that can turn that inorganic sulfur into organic sulfur. That's
Yeah.
basically what it boils down to.
Which is similar to what happens in our body when we have too many toxins. We just run out of the microorganisms and the mechanisms that can function to clean us up, clean it out, and we get overloaded. So we are
Yeah.
similar, right? Yeah.
So the plant life on this earth is not getting the right kind of sulfur from the rain because there isn't enough of the right kind of sulfur. Now there's too much of the wrong kind of sulfur. And so we've got chemical compounds being sprayed on crops, pesticides, herbicides. Now the commercially grown produce has actually more toxin content in it than it has nutrient content. And this was discussed by the woman who runs Moms across America.
Oh, right. We
I
talked about
wrote
that, I
about,
think,
yes,
on our last
yes,
episode together. It's like you're trying to eat healthy, you're trying to get even organic foods and high quality foods, and you're still getting this toxic load. And so you're adding to the problem and you're not getting enough of the good content that used to just be in our food in
yeah,
order to, again, help you clean yourself out and be healthy. So even if you're eating healthy, you're not getting enough and apparently not enough sulfur as well.
right. So Zen Honeycutt is her name, and she did a great interview with Del Bigtree a few months ago. And in that, she explained that when they actually went into prisons and they changed the food, now you brought up mental illness, the rate of recidivism went down, people
Right.
returning to prison after they were released, and the behaviors changed radically within the prison. And the same with schools, high schools. If you stop feeding these kids ketchup as a vegetable next to their totally processed dehydrated potatoes called French
Right.
fries, and the fast food that they eat called lunch,
Mm.
you change the achievement level of these kids, you change their behavior, they're not so reactive, violent. And if you think about it, I know if I'm uncomfortable physically, I'm going to be crabby and irritable, right?
Right.
And why do you think people work in sweatpants at home? Because I
Right.
honestly think, Lindsay, I'll go and look at paintings, the clothing that people wore in the olden days, right?
Right.
Those incredible collars and so much stitching and buttons and the pointy little boots, and I'm thinking, my God, if I had to dress like that, I would be so upset and unhappy all the time.
Yes. Right.
And our clothing, is like second skin compared to that, right?
Right.
And I think we need that because we have so many other assaults. We cannot bear one more moment of discomfort, so we opt for sweatpants. This is just my 2-cent theory that I
Yeah.
invented right now.
Well, no, I think you're right. And there's so much that can go along with that, right? We also, if we don't have the right nutrition and we're in any way ill, we can have this sort of brain fog experience. And then we're even less aware that we feel so crappy. And it's harder for us to, engage with anything or act. So we might act out and not even really understand why. And it's this sort of devolving cycle. We really need to get our nutrition right. We really need some help with this.
Yes, we do. And
And
we,
everyone is sick, and I don't know if everyone knows they're sick, because it's become sort of the norm to constantly not feel well. And when we finally feel well, it's like this miracle but that should be the norm. And we're sick because our food is sick, because things like this biogeochemical sulfur cycle that you're describing have been disrupted because the animals and the plants aren't getting what they need. And so when we eat the animals and plants, we're not getting what we need. And it's
Exactly.
this, again, this downward spiral.
And the
Oof,
government paid the food producers to use these chemicals. That's what doesn't make sense to me. I guess nobody in the 1950s scratched their heads and thought it was a bad idea to put chemicals onto and into food. I mean, why did they miss this? They missed this by a very wide berth. I don't get that.
I believe it was intentional. I would say a Rockefeller or Rothschild is probably behind it, and that it was
Yes.
intentional, but we also had that sort of fascination at that time, to give people some credit, of just chemistry. You're right. Better living through chemistry was like the phrase, and
Yeah,
everyone was
that's
excited
true.
to see if we could make ourselves better humans if we do this and this and tinker with that, and we didn't realize nature already was perfect.
So when sulfur contains carbon, it's critical to the proteins that our body makes. And I have experienced this directly through the results, all right? So let's talk about methyl sulfonyl methane, MSM. Now that is the form of sulfur, that is a molecule. And I give the entire little diagram of the molecule in that flyer. So it has sulfur in the center, and then to the north is an oxygen atom with a double bond, and to the south is an oxygen atom with a double bond. And to the east and west are two different types of methyl groups. One is H3C and the other one is CH3. I don't know enough about chemistry to explain the difference, but there's a reason that these two little methyl clusters help our bodies so tremendously. And you might want to explain that because of that study that you read, or?
Yeah, well, there's separate studies that I read, and I don't know how well I'll be able to explain this off the cuff, but some time ago, given all of my specific health conditions, I started to understand the lack of the ability of my body to transport nutrients. So even when I worked really hard to increase my nutrient density, my body didn't have the ability to transport those nutrients to the right places. And that this was a problem with what they called methyl donation. I didn't have enough methyl donation. My body didn't have enough methyl donors, they call them, in order to transport. And it's sort of like the zinc ionophore system we talked about a lot during COVID, right? To get the zinc to the right place in the body, you needed the zinc ionophores. This is a similar, you need the methyl donors in order to get the nutrients to the right places so your body can just function normally, get rid of toxins, get those nutrients to build the right stuff for the right places in your body. And I didn't have it. So I went looking for methyl donors. How do I get methyl donors in my diet, or supplemented or otherwise? And Sophia, the things I found were very expensive, and I could do them, but they just weren't sustainable. There was this amino acid, I believe, and it was called SAM-E, SAM-E. And I was taking that for a while, and I think it was helping a lot, but it's just so expensive and hard to get. And so then I tried some other things, and some things maybe are helping, but it sounds like MSM is actually just this massive methyl donor, which is exactly what. And I'll say it's not just me, right? And people say, oh, I don't know if I have that MTHR-FR gene, expression that is malfunctioning in me, which is what a lot of people think. You have to be tested for that and have it in order to be lacking in methyl donors. No, you don't. I would say that, again, in our industrialized food deprivation, nutrient deprivation, probably most people need some methyl donation, whether they think they have a condition or not.
Yeah, the methylation is the term they use to a methyl group molecule, which you're calling methyl donors, activating a receiving molecule. So it's like, the way I'm translating it, and this could be ignorant, but it's my effort,
right,
that methyl groups are like a little whip or a prod, and when they're like a giddy up to a receiving um, molecule in your body. They catalyze that molecule to do its job better. Okay, they're
Right.
activators of some kind. So they wake up. They wake up elements of the body, and you need methylation for this reason.
Right, and it's connected to everything, right? You just some of the things you're mentioning. Well, let's talk about first of all mitochondrial health, right? This is actually key too, and this is one of the keys that I've been drawn to again and again is how can I improve my mitochondrial health? And you and I have talked about it in so many different ways, but it turns out this is another way that you can improve your mitochondrial health.
Right, so MSM is methyl sulfonyl methane. So methyl on one side, methane on the other, and sulfonyl in the middle. That's the term, right?
Right.
And that is actually the molecule that is the centerpiece of organic sulfur, that is the centerpiece of the sulfur cycle on the receiving end, us and animals and the earth. You have to have MSM, and that inorganic sulfur that starts in the rocks has to be converted by microorganisms into MSM for us to get the full benefit of our biology and our life and our metabolism. So the MSM, a lot of people think, oh, it's a chemical, and it's a compound. It's not, I wouldn't call it a chemical. It's a natural compound, all right?
Right.
Which compound means it's made of other things. So with MSM, methylsulfonyl methane, coming to you through your food, your cellular regeneration starts working properly. So at one time, grass-fed livestock and regular produce, which was organic without chemicals, met our metabolic sulfur needs. But now in industrial countries, that's just not the case. So plants in another age used to be able to store sulfur and pass it on to animals and humans. But because they're weakened from the environmental assaults that they are subjected to, they simply cannot store sulfur, and there isn't enough sulfur for them to even store what we need, right, to pass it on to.
Yeah.
So they were the sulfur donors to other more complex energy forms like mammals and birds. And I mean, everything is suffering from this. So we have, as a consequence, this very high and continually growing rate of chronic disease. Now, if you think about it, remember sulfur springs, hot springs, sulfur baths? People have been doing that since ancient times. And
Yeah.
they were soaking in sulfur in sulfur springs because their body was taking it in and benefiting from it.
Mm. Right. And they didn't understand the mechanism necessarily, but they knew it was helping. That's so fascinating.
Yeah. So we have heard of DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide. I think that's what it is, dimethyl sulfoxide. Yep.
Right.
And dimethyl sulfoxide, I knew about this when I was in my early 20s. I was very active in the running world, and it was a popular compound that people put on their aching joints and muscles, and it eased the pain. So
Yeah.
there was a Dr. Stanley Jacob at University of Oregon, and he was looking into freezing tissues. I think it's called cryonics or something like that.
Yeah.
He was a tissue freezer, right? And he was searching for a protective way to freeze tissue. And he came across, kind of by accident, on DMSO, on its ability to penetrate tissues, to penetrate skin, and that it also had these analgesic, anti-inflammatory properties. Now, you were talking about aspirin. Low-dose aspirin is analgesic. It is anti-inflammatory. Remember, you mentioned that
Right.
at the beginning of the show. So Dr. Stanley Jacob tested DMSO, and the Midwestern doctor on Substack has written 2 or 3 posts exhilarated about, what's the word? Extolling DMSO. He's exhilarated about it. And
Yeah. I've seen some of
yes,
those posts. It's very
Yeah, and it penetrates skin. It reduces inflammation. It's a very healing agent, and it doesn't seem to cause any harm. That's one thing Midwestern doctor says over and over. You just don't hurt yourself with DMSO. So Stanley Jacob, University of Oregon, this was the 1960s. He tested DMSO on his patients with musculoskeletal conditions, and he found that it worked really, really well to relieve those conditions. So then he introduced it, DMSO, at a talk in front of the American College of Surgeons in 1963, and the newspapers just broke out in giant headlines about DMSO. So, what do you think happened? Did anyone care? No. That was
Got
the end of
suppressed.
DMSO. Yes.
Yeah.
That was the end. That was the beginning and the end. So, DMSO, dimethylsulfone, is the component of DMSO that relieves tissue pain. Dimethyl contains dimethylsulfone, and another name for dimethylsulfone is MSM, methylsulfonylmethane.
So taking DMSO is just sort of like an extra step for your body to get to the MSM.
Yeah, I think there are people who take DMSO orally, but it's more often, to my understanding, put on the skin, but your body still has to extract MSM out of it.
So I started putting DMSO on my skin a while back too, because I have chronic pain. I heard about this and it works really effectively. And more recently, and maybe it was even from the Midwestern doctor, I learned that people do just take the straight up, chemical liquid form of DMSO. It tastes awful, kind of like what you were describing with the MSM. And so I started doing that a little while ago, not that long ago, maybe less than a month ago. Because of the neuroprotective and the nerve regeneration possibilities, and again, all of these health issues I have, but I would love to get to something that's not only maybe cheaper, but more direct and less work for my body, which it sounds like MSM is.
Yeah, I think so, Lindsay. So MSM is odorless. It doesn't smell. It tastes very bitter, but you get used to it. Now, here's the thing. I crave my little sulfur dose. I'm up to a little over a teaspoon now. I started with a quarter teaspoon and I gradually increased it, and I noticed the benefits. Even a quarter teaspoon really benefited me because I had almost zero, I guess, going on in my body, zero sulfur. So what I've noticed is that technically you're supposed to take 1 teaspoon per 100 pounds of body weight at least once, if not twice a day. I'm not up to that. I've noticed that your body kind of tells you how much it wants. But the bitterness, the distaste for the taste has gone away. And a friend of mine started to take sulfur as well, because I bought a bunch of it over the summer, and I was just having friends and family use it. And I was collecting feedback while I researched this flyer. I didn't put any sulfur in my store because I didn't know what to expect. But anyway, so my friend comes over and he buys a 5-pound bag from me after his 1-pound bag. And he tells me his hiking is getting so much faster and better, and he's strong and he's able to carry these heavy weights on his hikes. And he's clutching this 5-pound bag to his chest like it's a little baby. And he said, I love this stuff. And I thought, wow, that's how I'm feeling about it. I love it. And I'm just taking my lousy little teaspoon a day, but it is doing wonders. So this is what I've discovered. I swim outdoors all year, and in the summer particularly, my forearms start to look terrible. They get very cross-hatched and dry, like wrinkly looking and almost scaly. And that has gone away. This summer, my skin just got so nice and soft, and it looked like I had been to an expensive spa and just doused myself with lotion. All right. And then you notice the body starts to change. You start getting stronger, more flexible, a lot less the grinding and creaky stiffness and pain. And I think older people are going to notice this more than younger people because they have these issues. They're kind of underlying, right?
Right.
So MSM, the way you make it in industrial methodology, see, here's the thing. You can't extract it from the soil. There is none. You can't extract it from plants. There's nothing. How are you going to do that? That's going to be much more expensive and difficult and nearly impossible than making it from DMSO. So when you add hydrogen peroxide to DMSO, the result you get is basically MSM, and you have to distill it and crystallize it for purification. So pure MSM is what you're after, and it's very, very dry. It should look like sugar, like white table sugar. But it should be even, I have the flakes form in my store, and that's the only MSM produced in America. The other MSM that everyone else sells all over, which is crystals, that comes from China. And it is purification of distilled hydrogen peroxide treated DMSO. So it should not have additives or flow agents added to it, and it should have almost no water content. So the MSM that I'm selling, which is made in America on avatarproducts.com, is 99.9% pure MSM in flake form, which is much easier to take. It almost melts in your mouth. I won't make that claim, but almost. And it has 0.1% water in it. So that's all it is. 99.9 MSM and 0.1% water. And that is critical to the bioavailability of MSM in your body. It's got to be pure.
Right. So that's really interesting. And I don't trust China and anything that comes from it. So this is why I love everything that is in your store actually at Avatar Products, because you research things so thoroughly. You don't put anything there that you wouldn't use yourself. You understand health and wellness more than most people because of all the years of research you've put into it, and you can just trust it. And I know that so many people just want something they can trust. So I'm so grateful for that. Bioavailable MSM. This also, you say in the flyer, and maybe we've kind of already touched on it, but I just want to reinforce it, that this is critical for all of our metabolic processes. And I'll add, I don't know that everyone has gotten to this place yet, but most people are metabolically unhealthy. That means their mitochondria is not doing well. And this is the central piece of your biology that needs to be doing well. Your metabolism has to be doing well for every other thing in your life to work out. Your brain, your heart, your ability to digest, to transport the nutrients like we were talking about. This seems like it's the miracle element because it's going to affect all of that.
Yeah, and that has to do with oxygen getting through and across that cell membrane. And, enough oxygen, speedy transport of oxygen, good metabolism. So 1931, Otto Warburg won the Nobel Prize in Physiology for his work on the metabolism of tumors and cancer cells. And we've read about Otto Warburg. He was mentioned in Arthur Firstenberg's book about electricity and life, The Invisible Rainbow, which is an excellent book. I just got tons of copies of that. People should definitely get that book. It's
highly recommended.
Avatar Products. It's so well written. It's so easy to follow and so fascinating. But anyway, so the root cause of cancer is mitochondrial failure. The mitochondria are responsible, some people say, for putting negative charge into the cytoplasm of the cells. Other people say for creating and fostering the ATP cycle, the production of energy in the cell. So when cells fall into this state called hypoxia or low oxygen, they start to become anaerobic, meaning they don't have oxygen, and they become cancerous potentially. And so Otto Warburg showed the world that cancer cells do not develop in the presence of high oxygen. He said, this is a direct quote, deprive a cell of 35% of its oxygen for 2 days, and it may become cancerous. So we are not getting good oxygen transport across the cell membrane because of the lack of sulfur in our body. The greatest gift that sulfur gives us is that it boosts oxygen getting across the cell membrane from the blood into the cell. And that is the key to health, energy production, and the ability to produce new cells, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
everything cells do, as you said, is dependent on oxygen getting from the blood into the interior of the cell to the mitochondria where ATP, which is the fuel of the cell, is created. So mitochondria have to have oxygen sufficiency and quick delivery in order to produce energy for the cell. Imagine if you had, broken doors at your house that nobody could get through. You couldn't get into your house. And that's the case with oxygen and the cell. You've got to have sulfur enabling that oxygen transport across the cell membrane. And you will notice that. Actually, there was a guy, Patrick McGeehan, who did the cellular matrix study. It was an informal usage data collection. I think he got data usage usage data from 190,000 people over the 15 years or so that he was selling MSM, and he's died. So he's no longer here to tell us anymore. But I heard from someone who knew him through perhaps somebody else. But Patrick McGeehan tried very hard to enlist the interest of some university or research lab or some facility to look at MSM and its therapeutic and life supporting properties, and no university was interested, no labs were interested, nobody cared, Lindsay, nobody cared.
I am not surprised because it's cheap relatively and it's so successful that it would put so many of the people who fund studies out of business.
Yeah.
It would not make them wealthy. So it makes sense to me, and this is it's everything. We're talking about the sulfur, and I'm thinking again back to the Walls Protocol, and I'm big on suggesting the Walls Protocol to people for its ability to heal so many disorders. And the main reason why is it's high on this sulfuric compounds that you can find in nature and food. And again, we don't even get enough of it from that. So MSM actually seems like it's the key to that protocol. I've researched all of this, like I said, about metabolic dysfunction, which everybody is suffering under, and why. And here we have this would be supporting our metabolic function. I've talked about how everything I have, autoimmune disorder and metabolic dysfunction, and that goes back to the similar sorts of disorders that lead to cancers, and that parasites seem to thrive in this, or maybe they even are cancer, depending on how you look at it. That EMF is overloading our systems, that we have all these toxins and heavy metals, and you can point to any of those things and say this is the problem, but underlying that, it's a sulfur problem. It's a methyl donor problem. And so we actually have this seems to address, I feel like, any concern you could possibly have about your own health. So it's really amazing to me.
There's a spectrum of improvement that you start to see, definitely in the first month a little bit, and then more and more radically after 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. I mean, now, it's winter, all right? I mean, we don't have much of a winter here, but it gets dark early and it's freezing at night because our houses are so crappy. They don't even have insulation. So I used to be stiff and cold, and iodine improved that a lot, and then grounding improved that a lot for me, which is why I'm such a big, proponent of iodine and grounding, both of which are sold in my store, grounding components and 3 or 4 different kinds of iodine. And I created a little graphic for my storefront called the Square of Health, and I plopped sulfur in the middle of it this summer because I would say that is the central thing that I was missing, okay?
Yeah.
And Lindsay, I ran on the beach barefoot yesterday, and the water was 56 degrees. So usually my feet get really stiff and cold, and there are rocks on the beach, and I would get tired if the sand isn't completely hard packed. And now I can run in a high tide with squishy sand, freezing water, and I don't get tired at all. And I am in my 60s. And I
Wow.
know that that is a contribution of sulfur, the lack of fatigue while exercising. And then here's the best thing. It changes your outlook and mood, or it has for me. I'm far less stressed, far less worried, far less agitated, and much calmer than I used to be before I started taking sulfur.
That's amazing. You know, this is the thing I notice too when I'm more on the illness side of things, when I'm experiencing distress of some kind. Tiny, stupid things will stress me out and overwhelm me. And when I'm on the wellness side of things and I'm feeling good, those same things don't bother me at all. I don't even notice them. So it really
Yeah.
is this matter of how well are you, and does your body have what it needs? But I love that for you. And how many months in are you?
I started very reluctantly, I think the first week of July, and it was just a quarter teaspoon I was taking throughout July, and then gradually a half teaspoon by August, and now it's a little over a teaspoon. And, I'm supposed to be taking pretty much twice that, but my body is saying, no, no, this is good. Just
Go
take this
slow.
much. Yeah.
Yeah, too much wellness at once will, cause the Herxheimer effect and detoxing effects, and that can be overwhelming too. So that makes sense. But so yeah, you're a little 6 months about in, and just so many positive benefits. I'm really excited. I like I said, I only took it for like a month. I saw my hair started to come back, and then I just stopped for some
I
reason.
know, it's
Um,
strange, isn't it? So it will improve skin, hair, nails, cartilage especially. It will make very flexible proteins. Your body has to be given time to change out those proteinaceous tissues.
mhm.
So the first thing you'll notice is digestion. I mean, some people have absolute wild, let's just call it flushing.
Yeah.
And if you're constipated, it is famous for correcting constipation.
And I've done episodes before where I've had people on who are experts in the field who talk about how actually everyone's constipated. Even if you don't think you are, your body is not able to release all that it wants to release. So let's at least say maybe 90% of people. So even if you're out there saying, well, I'm not constipated, well, you might be
You
actually.
might, yeah, I think a lot of people are carrying a couple of pounds of unevacuated fecal material in them, and sulfur will dump that right away, right away.
Wow.
Um, Also, it is said to, now again, I do have one of these. So seasonal and food allergies, arthritis, asthma, constipation, digestive issues, and chronic inflammation. So this is the thing. You've got to hydrate a lot. You've got to drink especially the first few weeks of sulfur, because you'll be making lots of glutathione, and your body will need the water to flush the toxins out. And, you know, one of the important things is that amino acids are the building blocks of our proteins, and 70%, that's over 2/3 of amino acids, are sulfur based.
Wow.
So if you don't have enough sulfur, you're not able to make your amino acids properly with their proper content. They're weak. Your proteins will crash and burn and fail, and your tissues will be brittle. And once you start pumping sulfur into your body on a daily basis, you have to do this because we cannot store sulfur. We
Uh,
don't store sulfur. Our body expects to get it from our food, and it's not getting it. So a body without adequate sulfur will break down and age faster than one that can draw on sulfur all the time.
So taking it throughout the day especially might be good. Breaking up that amount, teaspoon or two that you're supposed to take, maybe again, start slow, but maybe just do a couple smaller doses throughout the day. I also just, again, I feel like I'm just hammering this home, but I just don't think many people understand how disadvantaged their body already likely is in this toxic world we live in, how much the parasites and heavy metals and EMF and all of these things have really dragged them down. Even if they're eating healthy, they're not getting all the nutrients their body expects, like you just said. And so I would say, even if you don't think you have any sort of metabolic disorder or other disease state going on, well, then good. Why not keep it that way, right? Give your body what it really, really wants. And this is my goal more and more, is to address what's already going wrong, but then ideally stave off what is coming down the pike for most of us. So I'm just, again, I'm really excited to talk to you about this. I'm really excited for the possibilities for myself and others. And I'd say, even if you think you're just really, really healthy, I would say maybe look into this and think about it. And again, I love that your shop is one of the places that anybody can go and just really trust what they're getting there. So will you remind people exactly where to go and exactly what to get? And you also have these, again, really great electric discharge grounding mechanisms, and you can talk to people about that, talk them through it. And you have so much that is good to offer people for health and wellness.
Thank you, Lindsay. Yes, Avatar Products, AVATAR, avatarproducts.com. And I've got a keyboard grounding mat. If you happen to work somewhere and you are always at the computer, you might as well get this. It works really well. Your hands will be resting on it. It has room for the mouse. And it's a fantastic way to discharge body voltage and take in the free electrons from the earth, all of which contribute to the overall metabolic health. I mean, I can't go into why we need electrons now, because we've been talking sulfur all day, but we need all these things. And the purpose of my store is to share that which I have discovered and works really well myself. If I can get it, I'll usually try to sell it. And there are things that I can't get. They won't sell to a vendor as small as me, that kind of thing. It's very sad, but it's all right because it keeps my inventory manageable.
Yeah, right. Well, I hope your inventory is reduced greatly by people listening to this who want that high quality American made MSM. I also always enjoy getting your newsletters. You write so well, you research really interesting things, you put it together in a way that's easy to take in. It's always helpful information. So tell people how to sign up for your newsletter.
Well, it's not done by automatic email. You have to actually send in a donation. And for the first time in these last couple of months, I've raised my minimum donation to $70 a year. Oh my God. My photocopying costs have doubled. Postage has it has doubled. It's gone over double since I've been doing the newsletter. So, I'm very happy to share it, hard copy, snail mail, and I just finished an issue that I mailed out. I'm a little bit behind, but I'm hoping to close out the year with the last issue. So, Lindsay, you're going to get a bag of sulfur from me, definitely.
Yay!
Yeah.
That's very exciting.
I'm very excited about hearing what happens to you once you start taking it regularly, and not quitting. Don't quit. Right. I mean, I would tell people, no matter how bad it tastes, no matter how rough those first couple of weeks are, buy a lot of toilet paper. Yeah. Drink a lot of water and hang in there.
Yeah. And water, I'm going to add my minerals to my water too, so I'm not depleting any of my minerals by drinking all the extra water. And I'm sure my audience will be hearing about my journey through this, and then I'll have you back on and we can compare notes and talk about some more that you've learned by that point. So thank you. Yeah, let's gladly accept that gift. And Sophie, it's always so great to talk to you. What are your final thoughts you want to share with people today?
Oh, what can I say? I'm sitting under a few lightly painted chemtrails. They're not too bad. Oh, there's a big ugly patch of gunk developing. It's past my roof line. I was on my deck most of this show. Lindsay, all I can say is we're in this time and age because we have the capacity to deal with it. We've got to be creative. We've got to be insightful. We've got to share. We've got to give a lot of love to other people and share information and tell people not to quit and to keep on. Pray to God, sailor, but row for the shore.
Oof. Very well said. Beautifully said. And fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing. This has been your analog electric concentric dose of wisdom according to the wise and well, Sofia Smallstorm. Sofia, thank you so much for sharing with us tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and enjoy your sulfur. Mm-hmm.
Well, your health is everything. They say you can have hundreds of problems in life, but when your health is failing, you have only one problem. The best way to take care of yourself is preventative, meaning that you practice the three-part path to wellness. Increase your nutrient density coming in, decrease your toxin load in your life, and increase your toxin release pathways. And MSM helps all of the above. So as nature's always doing for us, it has yet provided another miracle right in our time of need. And until you give yourself the miracles you deserve, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first.
Very good, Lindsay.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, come on, Rap Kings, baby. It's the rap machine. Yeah, check it. Gray bearded pirate, my motherfucker unknown. Yeah, come on. In the place with my fist up, meaning I resist the bullshit that they feed us and lead us. This is just a part of the process, man. Just watch this, cause this shit's about to get crazy like a mosh pit. We lost it, toss it, let's start it again. Cause now with technology, with smarter men and women, this is the beginning, not the end. And this is the message of hope that I send. Look on your TV, it's a culture of death. They'll keep on lying to the very last breath. We keep on striving and spreading the truth. It's hard to survive in this world for the youth. The door is closed, the old world is dead. Let's have an age of understanding instead. I'll include you and you include me. Let's see what we can build with some positivity. Let's go, you're moving too slow. Let me see your hands if you know what I know. Come on.
Rap like mummy, ain't no dummy in my rhyming. Started flowing freestyling, now they rhyming loud silence. On with the violence, bodies piling with the gray-bearded pirate. On your TV in 4K 3D virtual reality. Casualty of urban warfare. I know but I'm not scared, just prepared and aware. Shining my light through the tunnel of hope. Into the rope, but I'ma give it one more pull till the family is full. Take the bull by the horns and lead it to the slaughter. That would be harder and you would be softer. Sometimes I'm a monster and you forever imposter. With your champagne and lobster. This royalty, the way it was supposed to be. Hopefully the new door opens and the old one closes. With way more focus and growth to mold us. And the truth that they should have told us.
Glued to them screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood wands of holly. Suggestions that a flicker rate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The paupers see this mockery and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet. Everyone got a gift, everyone got a light. They want you to forget that ish, cause they can't dim the bright. The positive vibration takes you past the sign shackles. From the sewers and the alleys in the moving castles. Who these assholes really serving with an exposed Achilles surgeon around the corner lurking to prove ascension trumps perversion. Learn them to catch fish and unplug the signal. Show them the simpletons now build the fucking temples.